Hey everybody, what is going on? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Brian, and we have what I think is a pretty fun video for today. It's been a little bit since I've done some Four Roses content, but thankfully, due to a friend of mine, I won't name him here, but you know who you are, I have samples of some miscellaneous OESO recipes, all from the MW-25 run, but they're different tiers. We do not have a tier 1, but we have something from tier 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 5 samples that I've blinded down below me, my first time trying them, and we're gonna figure out, does tier matter? Now I wanna do this video because, and I've talked about it a little bit in other Roses videos, but the tier placement doesn't exactly matter when it comes to Four Roses because of their single story aging. I've seen it reported 2 different ways recently that it's somewhere between 7 and 8 degrees difference from what is on the first rick and what's on the 6th, or on the first tier and the 6th tier. Now we do know that when we look at the bottles that there seems to be higher proof in the tier 6s, some lower proof in the tier 1s when they all shake out in the end. However, various runs, various warehouses, that temperature fluctuates. I feel like I see different runs where something in the tier 3s might still be above 120 proof. And there are some where it's pretty low proof all the way up. So I don't think those necessarily matter. But before we get into the tasting, let's just kind of look at the samples already as they are. Let me turn these labels around quickly, because I think, and if you can get past the fact that there is tape on here, I do think that we can quickly get a little bit and see. Now, I don't know where these picks came from. Maybe by the time of putting out this video, I'll have that information down below. But to me, I actually feel like I see some color difference for the darker in this one here, which happens to be tier 6, and this one here to be tier 4. The others seem about the same shade of light, and that includes this tier 5. It looks no darker to me than the others, but I will say that maybe tier 2 looks to be the least dark, but 4 and 6 seem to be pretty comparable. I won't be comparing the samples visually as we taste. Let's go ahead and start with sample A. We'll work our way down on the nose, we'll talk about them on the palate, and then we'll sum it up. A, really nice, balanced, and biting right away. It has this slightly potpourri fragrance to it. A little waft of floral, a little touch of smoke. But it's mainly fruitiness with a soft kind of chocolate ganache to it. Maybe a touch of banana to it. But overall, it's fruity, it's a little custardy, it's a little chocolatey. It's a little bit of a mineral touch to it, but it doesn't burn the nose. It's just nice, pleasing, sweet, and a little fruity. Let's move to glass B. Glass B, really similar on the nose. If anything, it might have a little less of the chocolate ganache and maybe a little bit more of a drying note to it, but it emphasizes more fruit. So where the first one maybe had a little bit more raspberry, this is like raspberry and strawberry. Definitely has some sugary sweetness, but a slightly drying spice to the end of that nose too. Let's go ahead and go to glass C. Glass C seems to have maybe the most amount of caramel vanilla, a little bit more than the fruit notes to it. Still has some fruit, but maybe a little bit more heat, a little bit more spice ramped in there as well. It definitely smells like it's going to be creamy. There's a little bit more saturation to the sugary sweetness. But as I mentioned, it kind of tamed it down the fruit a little bit in favor of maybe these vanillas and sugars. Let's go ahead and move to glass D. Glass D seems to burn the nose the most right away. A little oaky, a little leathery, a little tobacco, and then some fruit finishing. Still has some of that kind of custardy caramel note to it, but mainly hits on More of the leathers, the spice, the tobacco. Let's go ahead and go to Glass E. Glass E is actually really similar to Glass D. Maybe a little bit sweeter, a little more sugary. That sugariness takes over some of that tobacco note. But again, perhaps a little less of the fruit and more emphasis kind of on some vanilla, some sweetness with some tobacco and leather. All right, let's start with the palate back on A. See the legs on the glass a little bit. And the palate on A was not what I expected. It's almost like dripping honey. I don't know if you've ever had a honey stick or just maybe honey from a charcuterie tray or something like that, and it kind of gets all over the place. I don't know what other instance you'll have honey that just gets all over the place, but this is kind of like that. It first started with kind of a saturation of a honey sweetness, plump, juicy, sweet. There's some spice to it, but it never goes full on spice. You can tell right in the mid palate, and it kind of tingles around the gums, but it doesn't really get overly heated, and it doesn't really continue with a ton of spice. There's a really nice balanced amount of spice. It's actually not very fruity on the palate, or if it is, it's balanced with those nice honey notes. I really like that one. Honey forward, underneath red fruits, touch of chocolate in the finish. Let's go ahead and go to Glass B. Glass B is even more silky than Glass A. There's maybe a little bit more striking spice that will continue through this finish. That honey notes tame down. It has a soft layer of vanilla to it. The fruits are not pronounced, but I would say it has a little bit more fruit fronted to it, and then a pretty medium plus amount of spice that does linger and prickle on the palate. The more I nose it too, it kind of has like a strand of cinnamon that's in there as well. And that's definitely noticeable continuing through the finish. Let's go ahead and move to Glass C. Legs kind of washed out on this glass. Go into a taste. There's a nice chewy, plush mouthfeel to this one. The spice is low, sort of like the first glass, maybe even less than the first glass. Maybe a touch of a medicinal touch to it, but definitely fruit forward, definitely rounded and sweet. Some oak presence there. Overall, the most plump, the most juicy, the most saturating. Really nice fruit profile on that one. Let's go ahead and move to Glass D. This is where the nose kind of ramped up a little bit. I feel like the palate here, it saturates more. It kind of lays on the gums more. It sticks a little bit more. It sticks around a little bit more in the mouth. The flavors aren't all that different. It's just how much it lingers. This one definitely has some more of those oak, tobacco, and leather notes. More spice for sure. I feel like a slightly drying chocolate linger. Big fruit notes, but it's not as juicy as C because it's met with so much of this spice that kind of, again, tingles the gums a little like B, but it's so much richer, more saturated and clinging. It's really sticking to the sides of my mouth and the tongue lingering on. Let's go ahead and visit E. Woo! I feel like Glass E is the most medicinal of them all. It does strike with this kind of big custardy note, but lots of spice. Real big profile. Sure, some chocolate and fruit, but it's almost hard to sort through those with how large the profile is. Glass E is the one I would call the creamy spice rack. It's creamy, you get some of the fruit and chocolate notes in there too, but so much spice. Spiciest one of them all by far. Let's go ahead and do another rundown real quick, and I'll try and see if I can't place what I think the tier is. This first glass here, nice and balanced, but it's not overly spicy. I'm gonna go ahead and say, because I think one of them is a little lighter than this, I'm gonna go ahead and say that I think the first glass is the tier 3. Second glass. This is where the spice kind of started to pick up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's tier 4. I already think that the third glass, which is sample C, is tier 2. I think that glass D might be our tier 5, and glass E might be our tier 6. Let's go ahead and reveal. Wow, I was wrong. The fifth glass, the one that I thought was really nice and balanced, was actually our tier 5. Moving to the second glass that I thought was maybe the fourth tier was the third tier. Looks like I was correct. The one that came off maybe the lightest but also had the most juicy fruit notes was tier 2. I was also wrong about glass D. It was our tier 6. That means that the last glass would be our tier 4. Now, very interesting results. It's hard. They were all pretty close. I feel like if I was off, except for the first one, I was only off by a tier. Now, I feel like the last couple of samples, and even I guess tier 3. So the tier 3, 4, and 6 were the spiciest, the biggest of them at all. And again, with that tier 2 being the softest. However, with the tier 5 coming in as like the most balanced of them, and kind of a little close in profile to that tier 2, I can see it a little bit on the richness. I can see a little bit of maybe how it sticks around the gums, but this one that was tier 3 prickled a little bit too. It didn't stick around the gums the same way. You notice it more in the spice than the way that it lingers, but really interesting results. Guys, if I were to have to conclude from just these 5 samples, not doing any other runs, I don't know that tier makes all that much of a difference. However, I do think that we could tell ones that were a little bit lower, and I think we could tell some that might be a little bit higher. However, that spice thing and it hopping around and the fact that 5 was so balanced, it's really hard to say. I would have to say that maybe we need to dispel the myths, or at least know that these last 2 ones that I tried, they kind of masked a lot of the flavor that I was really hoping for. Some of the other, let's see, the tier 2, 3, and 5 highlighted some of the flavors a little bit better. So it could be left to the barrel. It could be left to the tier. All I would say is that don't throw out the tier just because it's lower as being worse. In a given run, any barrel is possible to have really good results. Guys, I hope that was informational to you all. If you all want me to do this with other flights, let me know. I'd love to take some other flights in and blind these and see how they go. But I hope that was informational to you all, especially in a time where we're like, oh, it's tier 6 or bust. We got to get the higher proof. I don't know. I think that the barrel 2 and the barrel 5 to me were the ones that really stood out here in the run. I can't wait to finally see what those barrels actually were. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Leave me a message down below. Let me know what you all think of any other MW-25 OESOs. Let me know what you think about the video. Let me know if you want to see me do more like this or other videos you want to see me do in the future. If you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let me know that I'm continuing to bring content to you that you're interested in hearing about. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you all later.